The cargo freighter drifted through the void, its hull scratched and dented from years of hauling supplies across the outer sectors. David Reed sat in the pilot's seat, watching the quarantine station grow larger on his view screen. 6 months alone in space had left him tired and ready for a hot meal that did not come from a food processor. Threshold 7 station appeared ahead like a giant metal wheel spinning slowly in the darkness. Every ship entering council space had to stop here first. The rules were simple. Get scanned, get cleared, move on. David had done this a dozen times before. The whole process took maybe 20 minutes if the station was not busy. His comm system crackled to life. A high-pitched voice spoke through the static. Freighter Delta 9, this is Threshold 7 control. Proceed to docking bay 17. Prepare for standard biosecurity processing. Copy that, Control, David replied. He guided his ship toward the designated bay, feeling the docking clamps engage with a heavy thunk. The airlock cycled, and he grabbed his identification chip before heading down the ramp. The station interior was clean and bright, nothing like his cramped freighter. Dozens of different species moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. A few floated in containment bubbles filled with ammonia or methane. David had learned not to stare during his first visit years ago. A tall figure with feathers and sharp eyes approached him. The being wore an official uniform with too many badges to count. I am Supervisor Quinn. Your documentation, please. David handed over his chip. Quinn inserted it into a handheld scanner and nodded. Human, from Earth. Cargo classification, medical supplies. Everything appears in order. Follow me to the scanning chamber. They walked through several corridors until reaching a large circular room. In the center stood a cylindrical chamber made of transparent material. Lights pulsed inside it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Standard procedure, Quinn explained, his beak clicking between words. Step inside. The scanner will analyze your genetic structure to ensure you carry no biological hazards. Takes 5 minutes. You can keep your clothes on. David had heard this speech before. He stepped into the chamber and heard the door seal behind him with a hiss. The lights intensified, washing over him in waves of blue and green. He felt nothing, just a slight warmth on his skin. Then something changed. The lights flickered. The steady hum of the machinery turned into a high-pitched whine. David looked through the transparent wall and saw Quinn tapping frantically at a control panel. Other technicians rushed into the room. The lights went red. Every screen in the chamber went dark. The entire scanning facility plunged into emergency lighting, bathing everything in a dim orange glow. The chamber door opened with a grinding sound. Quinn grabbed David's arm with surprising strength. Come with me now. What happened? David asked, but Quinn was already pulling him toward a side corridor. They entered a small room with blank walls and a single bench. Wait here, Quinn ordered, then left before David could ask any questions. The door locked with an audible click. David sat down and tried to make sense of what just happened. The scanner had malfunctioned. That was the only explanation. Equipment broke down sometimes. He had seen it happen on his own ship. Nothing to worry about. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, the door opened again. This time 3 figures entered. Quinn was there along with a being that looked like an oversized insect, and another with scales and cold eyes. The insect spoke first, its voice coming from a translator device. I am Dr. Halris, Chief Medical Officer of this station. The reptilian is Captain Vole, Head of Security. We need to ask you some questions. About what? David stood up, feeling his heart rate increase. The scanner broke. That is not my fault. The scanner did not break, Vole said, moving closer. His tongue flicked out, tasting the air. It shut down deliberately. The system detected something in your genetic profile and activated a safety protocol. That does not make sense. I have been scanned at other stations before. There was never a problem. Dr. Halris tilted his triangular head. Those were local systems. This station is connected to the primary Galactic Council database. It contains genetic records going back thousands of years. Your scan triggered something in the restricted archives. David felt cold despite the warm air in the room. Restricted archives? What does that mean? Quinn stepped forward, his feathers ruffled with agitation. The system found a match. Your DNA matched a profile that should not exist anymore. The database marked it as a critical threat and shut down to prevent contamination of other systems. I am not a threat. I am just a cargo pilot. I haul medical supplies and farming equipment. Nothing dangerous. We believe you, Dr. Halris said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But we must investigate. The protocols are clear. When the system detects a match in the forbidden records, the subject must be detained until council representatives arrive. How long will that take? 3 days? Maybe 4. Vol crossed his arms. You will remain in secure quarters. You will be fed and given access to entertainment systems, but you cannot leave. David wanted to argue, but the look in Vol's eyes told him it would be useless. Can I at least know what profile my DNA matched? The 3 officials exchanged glances. Finally, Quinn spoke. We do not have that information. The records are sealed. Only the council has access. All we know is that the match came from something called the Precursor Archives, files that date back 50,000 years. The words hung in the air like a weight. 50,000 years, long before humans had even invented writing, long before recorded history on Earth. That is impossible, David whispered. Yes, Dr. Halris agreed. It should be. But the system does not lie. And it has never malfunctioned in 200 years of operation. They led him to a larger room with a bed and basic furniture. The door sealed behind him and David sat down heavily, his mind racing. Somewhere in the Galactic database, there was a genetic profile that matched his DNA. A profile from a species that existed before humans had even left the caves. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering what the council would say when they arrived. Wondering what secrets were buried in those forbidden files, and wondering if he really wanted to know the answers. Outside his door, the station continued its normal operations, but deep in the data core, automated messages were being sent across the galaxy. Messages marked urgent. Messages that would change everything. 2 days of waiting had driven David halfway to madness. The walls of his detention room seemed to grow smaller with each passing hour. He had read everything available on the entertainment system, watched countless videos about species he had never heard of, and exercised until his muscles ached. Still, no one came to explain what was happening. On the 3rd morning, the door opened. A young mammalian creature entered, covered in soft gray fur and carrying a portable computer. Large eyes blinked nervously as she approached. My name is Rin, she said, her voice quiet and hesitant. I am a systems analyst. I have been working on recovering the data from your scan. David sat up quickly. Did you find anything? Rin nodded and placed her computer on the small table. Yes, and it is very strange. The system did not malfunction like everyone thought at first. It performed exactly as designed. Your scan completed successfully. Every single genetic marker was cataloged and analyzed. Then why did it shut down? Because it found what it was looking for. Rin tapped the screen, bringing up streams of code that meant nothing to David. The database contains multiple layers. Surface-level data for current species, deeper archives for extinct ones, and at the very bottom, sealed records from before the council was formed. She pulled up another screen showing a timeline that stretched back impossibly far. 50,000 years ago, this part of the galaxy was dominated by 12 species. We call them the Precursors. They built cities on thousands of worlds. They traveled between stars as easily as you or I might walk between rooms. Then they vanished. All of them? All of them. No bodies, no explanation, just empty cities and ruins. The current galactic civilization developed in the vacuum they left behind. We are all children compared to what they were. David leaned forward, studying the screen. And you are saying my DNA matched one of these precursor species? Not just matched. Perfect match. Down to the smallest marker. According to the database, you are genetically identical to samples recovered from a facility on a dead world called Archive 2. The species designation is listed simply as Species 7. A chill ran down David's spine. That does not make sense. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years. We are not some ancient spacefaring species. Rin's ears flattened against her head. I know, that is what makes this so confusing. I checked Earth's records. Your species only developed spaceflight about 200 years ago. Before that, you were confined to your home planet. Nothing in your history suggests any connection to the precursors. Maybe the database is wrong. The database is never wrong. That is why everyone is so frightened. Rin closed her computer and looked at him with those large, worried eyes. Captain Vol has contacted the council. They are sending representatives, important ones. Ambassador Trell himself is coming, and he has not left the council homeworld in 30 years. Before David could respond, the door burst open. Captain Vole entered with 4 armed guards. His scales gleamed in the harsh light and his expression was harder than before. "The council delegation has arrived early," he announced. "They demand to see the human immediately." Rin gathered her equipment and scurried out. The guards surrounded David, not threatening but clearly ready to act if he tried anything. Vole led them through the station's corridors. Other species pressed against the walls, staring at David with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear. They entered a large conference room. At the center sat an amphibian being so old that his skin had turned almost translucent. Beside him floated a crystalline entity that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Several other council members lined the walls. "Sit," the amphibian croaked, gesturing to a chair across from him. "I am Ambassador Trell. This is Archivist Num. We have come a very long way to meet you, David Reed." David sat, feeling like a specimen under examination. "I do not understand any of this. I am just a cargo pilot." "Perhaps," Trell said. "Or perhaps you are something far more significant. Tell me, what do you know of your species' history?" "We evolved on Earth, developed technology slowly over thousands of years. Reached space about 2 centuries ago. Nothing special." The crystalline being Num chimed like wind through glass. His words came through a translator. "Nothing special. That is what makes this so remarkable. Your species appears to have no memory of what you once were." "What we once were?" David felt his frustration building. "You keep talking in riddles. Just tell me what is going on." Trell leaned back, his ancient eyes studying David carefully. "Very well. 50,000 years ago, 12 species ruled this galaxy. We have found their ruins, analyzed their technology, recovered genetic samples from preservation facilities. One of those species, Species 7 in our records, matches your human DNA perfectly. That is impossible. We thought so too. But the evidence is undeniable. Somehow your species survived whatever catastrophe destroyed the precursors. But in surviving, you lost everything. Your technology, your knowledge, your entire civilization. You regressed to a pre-technological state and had to start over from nothing." David shook his head. "If that were true, there would be evidence. Ruins on Earth, ancient technology, something." Num chimed again. "Perhaps there is. Perhaps your species has simply not found it yet. Or perhaps the regression was so complete that even your planet was affected. We do not have all the answers. That is why we need your cooperation." "Cooperation for what?" Trell stood slowly, his movement stiff with age. "We need you to come with us to Archive 2, the facility where the original precursor genetic samples were found. If there are answers to be had, they will be there. And you, as a living member of Species 7, may be able to access systems that have been locked for 50,000 years." David thought about his simple life hauling cargo between stations. He thought about Earth, far away in its quiet corner of space. He thought about the impossibility of what they were suggesting. "What if I refuse?" "Then you will remain detained here indefinitely. The Council cannot allow you to roam freely, not with what we now know. You are either a threat or a key to understanding our past. Either way, you are too important to ignore." The room fell silent. David looked at each face surrounding him, seeing fear mixed with hope, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Finally he nodded. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow," Trell said. "Prepare yourself. You are about to discover secrets that have been buried since before your species learned to make fire." As the guards escorted David back to his room, he caught a glimpse of Rin watching from a doorway. She looked at him with something like pity, and he wondered what she knew that he did not. What horrors or wonders waited in those ancient archives? What truth about humanity was buried in the ruins of the precursors? Sleep did not come easily that night. The Council ship cut through space at speeds that made David's cargo freighter look like a floating rock. Through the viewport, stars stretched into lines as the vessel jumped between systems using technology humans had only begun to understand. Ambassador Trell sat across from David in the observation lounge, his webbed fingers wrapped around a container of heated liquid. "You are quiet," the old amphibian observed. "Most beings would have questions after learning what you learned." David kept his eyes on the stars. "I have questions. I just doubt you have answers that will satisfy me. Try me." "Fine. If humans are really these precursors, why do we not remember? Why did our civilization collapse so completely that we had to start over from stone tools?" Trell made a gurgling sound that might have been a sigh. "We do not know. That is the truth. The precursors left no records explaining their disappearance. One day they were everywhere, building wonders that we still cannot replicate. The next day, silence, empty cities, dead worlds. Whatever happened, it was sudden and absolute. Except humans survived. Yes, somehow your ancestors endured. But at what cost? Your genetic code is identical to the precursor samples, but everything else is gone. Your technology, your culture, your memory. It is as if someone wiped the slate clean and forced you to begin again. Archivist Numb floated into the lounge, his crystalline body catching the starlight and scattering it across the walls. We will arrive at Archive 2 in 4 hours. You should prepare yourself for what you might see. What exactly am I going to see? The truth, Numb chimed. Or at least pieces of it. The hours passed slowly. David tried to rest but found sleep impossible. His mind kept returning to Earth, to the simple life he had known. He thought about human history, all the struggles and achievements. Were they really just echoes of something greater, something lost? The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a sensation that David felt in his bones. Through the viewport, a gray planet hung against the black. No atmosphere, no oceans, just bare rock and the skeletal remains of structures that must have been magnificent once. Archive 2, Trell announced. Once a thriving world, now a tomb. They descended in a shuttle toward the planet's surface. The ruins grew more visible as they approached. Massive towers lay broken like fallen trees. Roads led nowhere. What might have been parks or gardens were now just flat expanses of dead soil. The shuttle landed near a dark opening in the ground. Stairs descended into darkness, carved from stone that showed no signs of weathering despite 50,000 years of exposure. The main archive is below, Numb explained, protected by the planet's crust. It is one of the few precursor facilities we have found mostly intact. They suited up and descended. Emergency lights flickered on as they entered the facility, responding to their presence. The corridors stretched in all directions, perfectly preserved. Strange symbols covered the walls, language that no current species could read. David reached out and touched one of the symbols. The moment his gloved hand made contact, the symbol glowed. Then another lit up and another, spreading down the corridor like a wave. Fascinating, Numb chimed. The facility recognizes you. They followed the glowing symbols deeper into the complex. The corridors opened into a vast chamber filled with strange equipment. Towers of machinery hummed to life as they entered. Screens activated, displaying images and text that shifted too quickly to follow. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal with a handprint carved into its surface. The entire facility seemed to be pointing toward it, waiting. That is where we found the genetic samples, Trell said. The preservation system was still functioning after all these millennia. We extracted tissue samples from 12 different species. Yours was one of them. David approached the pedestal slowly. Every instinct told him to turn around and leave, to go back to his simple life and forget everything he had learned. But another part of him, something deeper, pulled him forward. What happens if I touch it? We do not know. We have tried having other species interact with the systems here. Nothing happened. But you are different. You are one of them. David removed his glove. The air in the chamber was cold but breathable. He placed his bare hand on the pedestal, matching his palm to the carved print. The room exploded with light. Holographic displays erupted from every surface. Images of worlds, star charts, beings that looked remarkably human but also different in subtle ways. Text scrolled across the displays in that same unknown language, but as David watched, the symbols began to make sense. Not perfectly, but enough. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in a language David had never heard but somehow partially understood. The words were old, tired, desperate. The hologram showed Earth as it had been 50,000 years ago. Cities of crystalline light covered the continents. Ships moved through the atmosphere. Then something changed. A tear in space appeared in the holographic display, spreading like a wound. The voice spoke of catastrophe, of a threat from beyond their dimension. The images showed the precursors making a choice. They could fight and likely die, or they could hide. But hiding meant sacrifice. It meant giving up everything they were, everything they had built. It meant regression to a state so primitive that whatever hunted them would not recognize them as prey. David watched as the hologram showed humans voluntarily destroying their own technology. Watched as they sealed their knowledge in facilities like this one. Watched as they used genetic manipulation to lock away the memories of what they had been. ensuring their descendants would start fresh, untainted by the knowledge that might attract attention. The final image showed Earth, transformed into a primitive world. Small tribes of humans huddled around fires, their advanced ancestors reduced to survival basics, but alive, hidden among the younger species of the galaxy, waiting for the threat to pass. They chose to forget, David whispered. They chose to become less than they were to survive. The hologram faded. The voice fell silent, but new displays activated, showing a map of locations across the galaxy, other archive sites, other pieces of the puzzle. Trell stepped forward, his old eyes wide. Can you read that? Some of it, not all, but enough. David pulled his hand away from the pedestal, feeling drained. The precursors did not die. They ran, they hid, and humans were part of that hiding. We made ourselves small and primitive and scattered ourselves on a backwater world where no one would look. What were they hiding from? Num asked. David looked at the symbols he could almost but not quite read. I do not know. The language is not coming through clearly. Something from outside, something that should not exist in our dimension. They called it, he struggled with the translation. The Eater of Stars? The void that hunts? I cannot be sure. And is it still out there? The question hung in the chamber like a weight. David had no answer. The holographic records had shown the threat, shown the desperate flight and hiding, but nothing about what had happened after. Nothing about whether the danger had passed or simply stopped looking. I think we need to find the other archives, David finally said. This one only has pieces. The whole story is scattered across the galaxy in these facilities, and I think I am the only one who can access them. Trell and Num exchanged glances. Finally, the old ambassador nodded. Then that is what we will do. But first, we must return to the Council. They need to know what we have found. They need to know that humans are not a threat, but refugees, survivors of something that nearly destroyed the galaxy 50,000 years ago. As they made their way back to the shuttle, David took one last look at the chamber. Somewhere in human DNA was the memory of what they had been. Somewhere in his genes was the knowledge of beings who could reshape worlds and travel between dimensions. But that knowledge was locked away, buried beneath 50,000 years of intentional amnesia. Perhaps, he thought, that was for the best. Perhaps some memories were meant to stay buried. But he also knew that the galaxy was about to change. The discovery of humanity's true nature would send shockwaves through every civilization. And whatever the precursors had been hiding from might still be out there, waiting in the dark. The question was whether waking up was safer than staying hidden. News traveled fast in the galactic community. By the time the Council ship returned to Threshold 7 Station, every major news network was broadcasting the story. Humans were precursors. The species that had seemed like primitive newcomers were actually the descendants of the galaxy's ancient masters. Panic spread like wildfire. David watched the news feeds from his quarters on the station. A Trilaxian military general demanded immediate quarantine of human space. A business consortium proposed economic sanctions. Religious groups called it a sign of the end times. Scientists wanted access to human genetic samples. Everyone had an opinion, and most of those opinions were based on fear. They are terrified of us, David said as Rin entered his room carrying a datapad. They think we are going to remember how to blow up planets or something. Rin's ears twitched nervously. Can you blame them? The precursors were capable of incredible things. They built structures we still cannot understand. They manipulated space and time. If humans suddenly remembered how to do those things, you would be the most powerful species in the galaxy. But we do not remember. That is the point. My ancestors made sure of that. For now. Rin placed the datapad on the table.
That is what scares people.
What if the knowledge comes back? What if meeting the precursor technology triggers something in your genes? What if you start evolving back into what you were? David picked up the datapad. It showed proposal after proposal being submitted to the Council. Most involved restricting human movement, monitoring human populations, or outright isolation of Earth. One extreme faction suggested preemptive military action. This is insane, David muttered. A week ago I was just a cargo pilot. Now half the galaxy wants to lock up my entire species. The door opened again. Ambassador Trell entered, moving slowly with the aid of a walking stick. His age seemed to have caught up with him during the journey back. The Council convenes in 1 hour. You must speak to them, David Reed. You must make them understand. Understand what? That we are harmless? They will not believe that, not when they know what the precursors were capable of. Then make them understand that you are not the precursors. You are something new, something different. Trell sat down heavily. I have spent my entire life studying the ancient past. I have seen what the precursors built, and I have wondered what happened to them. Now I know. They chose to become small to survive. That choice took courage. Use that story. Make the Council see humans not as a threat, but as proof that even the mightiest can choose peace over power. The council chamber was packed when David arrived. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, their eyes following him as guards led him to the central platform. Cameras hovered in the air, broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. The council speaker, a being with too many limbs to count, called the session to order. We are here to address the matter of species designation Earth-human, recently identified as genetic descendants of precursor species 7. The human David Reed will address the council first. David stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Fear, anger, curiosity all mixed together. He thought about what to say, how to make them understand. Finally, he just spoke the truth. I know you are afraid. I would be too. The precursors were powerful, and now you learn that humans carry their genes. You are wondering if we will become what they were, if we will dominate the galaxy like they did. He paused, letting the words sink in. But we will not. Not because we cannot, but because we are not them anymore. A reptilian delegate stood up. How can you promise that? The genetic code is the same. The potential is there. The potential, maybe. But not the knowledge. Not the memory. My ancestors did not just hide from whatever threatened them. They erased themselves. They destroyed their own civilization so completely that we had to start from nothing. Do you understand what that means? They gave up everything. Their technology, their power, their very identity, all to survive. And now you have found that technology again, another delegate called out. You accessed the archive. You activated systems that have been dead for 50,000 years. What is to stop you from learning everything the precursors knew? David gripped the podium. Nothing. Nothing stops me from going to every archive site and unlocking their secrets. Nothing stops humanity from reclaiming what our ancestors were, except choice. The same choice they made 50,000 years ago. They chose survival over power. They chose to become less rather than fight and die. That choice is in our genes just as much as their abilities. The chamber erupted in arguments. Delegates shouted over each other. The speaker called for order repeatedly before the noise finally died down. A voice cut through the chaos. It belonged to General Brath, commander of the largest military fleet in Council space. Pretty words, but words do not change reality. Humans have always been aggressive. You spread quickly, adapt easily, and never back down from conflict. Those are precursor traits awakening. You are already becoming what you were. We are survivors, David shot back. Yes, humans are aggressive. Yes, we adapt and spread. Because that is what you do when you spend 50,000 years clawing your way back from nothing. We had to be aggressive to survive on a primitive world. We had to adapt to reach space with technology we invented ourselves. We did not have the precursors' gifts. We had to earn everything the hard way. Which makes you more dangerous, not less, Brath growled. You have the potential of the precursors combined with the ruthlessness of a species that had to fight for every scrap. The chamber fell silent. David realized the general had a point. Humans were not gentle. History proved that. Wars, conflict, competition. It was all there in human culture. But so was something else. You are right, David said quietly. Humans are dangerous. We are competitive and aggressive. But we are also more. We create art and music. We help those weaker than ourselves. We dream of better futures and work to build them. The precursors gave us their genes, but 50,000 years of evolution gave us something else. Something they might not have had. We learned humility. We learned cooperation. We learned that survival is not just about being the strongest. It is about being adaptable, working together and choosing when to fight and when to make peace. He looked directly at General Brath. You fear what we might become. I understand that. But I ask you to consider what we are right now. We are a species that survived the impossible. We are a species that rebuilt civilization from nothing. And we did it without destroying others to get there. We asked to join the galactic community. We did not demand it. We did not conquer it. We asked? Ambassador Trell rose from his seat. The human speaks truth. In all our observations of Earth and human colonies, we have seen aggression, yes, but also restraint. They have weapons capable of destroying their own world, yet they have not used them in 2 centuries. They have the ability to take what they want by force, yet they negotiate and trade. Perhaps the precursors' greatest gift to humanity was not their power, but their wisdom in choosing to abandon it. The chamber buzzed with conversation. David watched delegates conferring with their advisors, saw the uncertainty in their faces. They wanted to believe him, but fear was a powerful motivator. Finally, the speaker called for silence. The council will deliberate. David Reed, you will wait while we decide your species' fate. Guards escorted him out of the chamber. In the waiting room, David collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Rin appeared at his side, offering water. You did well, she said softly. You made them think at least. But will thinking be enough? Or will fear win? Outside, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the children of the precursors would be welcomed or shunned. Waiting to see if the return of humanity's true heritage would mean cooperation or conflict. The next few hours would determine whether humans would join the galactic community as equals or be isolated as threats. David closed his eyes and thought about Earth, about his home, his simple life, all the ordinary humans who had no idea their entire existence was being debated light years away. Whatever the council decided, humanity would survive. They had survived worse. They had survived the fall from power to primitiveness. They had survived 50,000 years of starting over. They would survive this too. The question was what they would become in the process. 3 days passed while the council deliberated. David spent the time reading everything he could find about the precursors. Archaeological reports, scientific theories, fragments of recovered data. The more he learned, the more he understood why the galaxy feared humanity. The precursors had not just been advanced. They had been gods in everything but name. They terraformed worlds in months instead of centuries. They created artificial life forms that could survive in any environment. They built machines that harvested energy from collapsing stars, and Species 7, the humans' ancestors, had been among the most innovative of them all. On the 4th day, Rin burst into his quarters without knocking. Her fur stood on end and her eyes were wide. They found something. Another human, someone who was already studying the precursors. She was working at Archive 2 before any of this started. What? Who? Her name is Lena Bright. She is a xenoarchaeologist. She has been studying precursor sites for 5 years. The council just realized she is human. They are bringing her here immediately. David's head spun. How did no one notice she was human before? She was working in remote locations with small teams. Her genetic profile was in the standard database, not the precursor archives. No one had reason to run her through the deep scan. But now, with all the attention on humans, someone checked. She is on a transport ship arriving within the hour. When Lena Bright walked into the meeting room, David understood immediately why she had been successful in archaeological work. She moved with confidence, her eyes sharp and curious rather than afraid. She looked at the assembled council members like they were interesting specimens rather than potential threats. So, she said, taking a seat without being asked, I hear my entire species has been causing quite a stir. Ambassador Trell leaned forward. You have been studying precursor sites for years. Did you never suspect the connection? Why would I? I am an archaeologist, not a geneticist. I study dead civilizations, not living ones. I have been trying to understand what happened to the precursors, same as everyone else. Turns out I should have been looking in a mirror. Despite the tension, several council members made sounds that might have been laughter. David found himself liking this woman immediately. What can you tell us about the sites you have studied? Archivist Numkind. Lena pulled out a data pad and projected holographic images into the air. Ruins appeared, structures that defied easy explanation. I have worked on 17 different precursor sites across 9 systems. What struck me most was not the technology, though that is impressive. It was the evidence of sudden abandonment. These places were not destroyed or conquered. They were just left behind. Food still on tables. Projects half finished. Like everyone simply walked away in the middle of their day. Because they did, David said. I saw it in the archive. They chose to leave everything behind. Lena studied him for a moment. You are the cargo pilot who activated the archive systems. The one who can read the precursor language. Partially. I get impressions more than exact translations. That is more than anyone else can do. She turned to the council. This changes everything about my research. I have been studying these sites like they were alien. But they are not. They are human. Our ancestors built them. Our ancestors walked those corridors. The answers I have been searching for are not in the ruins. They are in our genes. General Brath spoke up, his voice hard. And that does not frighten you? Knowing what your species was capable of? Frankly, no. Because capability is not the same as intent. My ancestors chose to give up that power. That tells me more about who they were than any amount of advanced technology. They valued survival over dominance. That is admirable, not frightening. But now you know the technology exists, another delegate argued. You could seek it out. You could reclaim it. I could, Lena agreed. But why would I? I am happy being an archaeologist. I do not want to reshape planets or build dimensional gates. I want to understand the past. The fact that the past happens to be my species' history makes it more interesting, not more dangerous. The meeting went on for hours. Lena described her findings in detail, showing how precursor sites were carefully preserved, almost as if meant to be found later. She theorized that the precursors had not wanted their knowledge completely lost, just hidden until the threat passed. They left breadcrumbs, she explained, archive sites positioned where younger species would eventually find them. Technology that could be studied but not easily replicated. They wanted someone to remember what they were, even if they themselves forgot. But the threat might still exist, Num pointed out. The records David accessed mentioned something from outside, something that hunted them. If that danger is still present, then awakening the precursor's descendants could draw its attention. David felt cold. He had been so focused on the present crisis that he had not fully considered that possibility. What if revealing humanity's heritage brought back the very thing the precursors had been hiding from? Lena must have sensed his worry. She spoke calmly, addressing the concern directly. We have no evidence the threat still exists. 50,000 years is a long time. Whatever it was, it may be long gone. And even if it is not, hiding clearly worked once. We survived by becoming small and primitive. We can survive again by being smart about how we move forward. How would you suggest we proceed? Ambassador Trell asked, carefully. Continue studying the archive sites, but do not rush to unlock everything at once. Let human scientists work with council experts. Share information, collaborate. The precursors' mistake might have been isolation. They were so advanced that they had no peers, no one to turn to when the threat appeared. The current galactic community has something they did not. Diversity, unity, different species working together. That is humanity's best protection now. Not the power of the precursors, but the strength of the council. The chamber fell quiet. David realized that Lena had just proposed a solution that no one else had considered. Not isolation, not control, but integration. Let humans be part of the galactic community so completely that they would never face threats alone. General Brath growled softly. A reasonable suggestion, but it requires trust. How can we trust that humans will not pursue their ancestral power in secret? You cannot, David said. Just like we cannot trust that you will not try to restrict or harm us out of fear. Trust is not something we can prove with words. It has to be built through actions over time. All we can do is promise to be transparent. Let council observers on Earth. Let your scientists study alongside ours. Let humanity prove through our choices that we are not the precursors anymore. We are something new, Lena nodded in agreement. The precursors failed because they faced their threat alone and unprepared. Modern humanity succeeds by being part of something larger. That is the lesson here. Not that we should fear our past, but that we should embrace our present. Ambassador Trell rose slowly, his ancient body creaking. Wisdom from the young. Perhaps that is fitting. The old ways led to catastrophe. New ways may lead to survival. He looked around the chamber. I will recommend to the council that we accept humanity as full members, with the conditions the humans themselves suggest. Transparency, cooperation, shared research. But I will also recommend that we expedite this process. The longer we deliberate, the more fear grows. Fear breeds suspicion, and suspicion breeds conflict. Better to integrate quickly and build trust through action. The military will oppose this, General Brath warned. Many see humans as a threat that must be contained. Then the military must be convinced, Trell replied. Perhaps by humans themselves. David Reed, Lena Bright, you have shown courage and wisdom in the face of revelation. Would you be willing to speak to military commanders directly, to answer their questions and address their concerns? David and Lena exchanged glances. It was a dangerous proposition. Military minds tended toward worst-case scenarios and decisive action, but it was also an opportunity. Yes, they said together. Over the next several days, David and Lena met with military leaders from across the galaxy. They answered questions, endured suspicion, and slowly built bridges. They showed that humans were willing to be vulnerable, to open themselves to scrutiny because they had nothing to hide. Gradually, opinion began to shift. Not everywhere and not completely, but enough. Enough that when the Council finally voted on humanity's status, the decision was narrowly in favor of full membership. With conditions, with observers, with restrictions on certain types of research, but membership nonetheless. When David heard the news, he felt something release in his chest, a tension he had not even realized he was carrying. Humanity would not be isolated. They would not be contained or quarantined. They would be part of the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Lena found him looking out at the stars. Thinking about what comes next? Yeah, this is just the beginning. Now we have to live up to the promises we made. We have to prove that humans can be trusted with the knowledge of what we were. We will. Not because we are perfect, but because we are honest about being imperfect. That is the difference between us and the precursors. They thought they could handle everything alone. We know we need help, David smiled. When do you head back to Archive 2? Tomorrow. Want to come? I could use someone who can read the language even partially. We have a lot of secrets to uncover. Might as well do it properly. Yeah, I think I would like that. Beats hauling cargo. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued turning, unaware that its people had just been granted full citizenship in a galaxy they barely knew, unaware that they were the children of gods who had chosen to be human instead. And perhaps, David thought, that was the greatest achievement of all. 6 months had passed since the revelation that shook the galaxy. David stood on the observation deck of a research vessel orbiting Earth, watching his home planet spin slowly below. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. From space it looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had erupted across the stars. But Earth had changed, even if it did not look different from orbit. The truth had reached home. Every human now knew they were descendants of the precursors. Some celebrated it. Others feared it. Most just tried to continue their lives while philosophers and scientists debated what it all meant. Beautiful, is it not? David turned to see Lena approaching, carrying 2 containers of hot coffee. Real coffee, shipped from Earth at great expense, one of the few luxuries they allowed themselves while working in deep space. I was just thinking how normal it looks. Like nothing has changed. Everything has changed. We just cannot see it yet. Lena handed him one of the containers. I got a message from the Council this morning. 5 more human archaeologists have been approved to join precursor research teams. 3 engineers have been invited to study the sealed technologies. We are being integrated faster than anyone expected. Is that good or bad? Good, I think. The faster we prove we can be trusted, the faster the paranoia fades, though I imagine it will take generations before some species stop looking at us sideways. David sipped his coffee, savoring the familiar taste. Any progress on the language translations? Some. Your genetic affinity helps, but we still need to develop proper translation matrices. The precursor language is not just words, it is layered with mathematical concepts and dimensional references. Even you can only catch fragments. Maybe that is intentional. Maybe they did not want it to be easy to recover what was lost. A soft chime interrupted them. Rin's voice came through the comm system. David, Lena, you should come to the lab. We found something in the Archive 2 data. Something important. They made their way through the ship's corridors to the research lab. Rin stood before a massive holographic display, her fur bristling with excitement. Ambassador Trell was there too, his aged eyes bright with curiosity. Archivist Num floated nearby, his crystalline form pulsing with light. What did you find? David asked. Rin manipulated the display, bringing up a file that David had not seen before. This was buried in the deepest level of the archive. It required 3 separate authentication protocols to access. 2 we bypassed with Council authority. The 3rd only opened when David's genetic signature was present in the facility. The hologram showed what looked like a message. A figure appeared, humanoid but not quite human. The proportions were slightly different. The eyes larger, the features more refined. This was what humans had looked like 50,000 years ago before the regression. The figure spoke in the precursor language. David concentrated, trying to catch the meaning. Partial understanding came in waves. A message, he translated haltingly. To whoever finds this, to our children. If any survive. We fled because we had to. The consuming dark came from beyond the walls of reality. It fed on conscious thought, on civilization itself. The more advanced a species, the more it attracted the dark. We were the brightest beacon in the galaxy. We were dying. The figure in the hologram continued speaking. David struggled to keep up with the translation. So we chose to hide. We created the regression protocol, a genetic switch that would lock away our knowledge, our technology, our very understanding of what we were. We scattered ourselves on primitive worlds and made ourselves small. Small enough that the dark would not notice. Small enough to survive. The hologram showed images of the precursors destroying their own cities, dismantling their technology, deliberately setting themselves back thousands of years of development. We do not know if it worked. We will not be here to see. The regression will take our memories, our identity. We will become something new, something innocent. If you are seeing this message, then our descendants survived. Then the plan worked. The dark either moved on or died. The threat is gone. David paused, his throat tight. The hologram showed families saying goodbye to their own civilization. Parents teaching their children to hunt with primitive tools. Scientists carefully calibrating how far to fall to ensure survival. But we leave you this warning, David continued translating. The consuming dark was not unique. It came from the spaces between dimensions, and where there is one, there may be others. Do not make our mistake. Do not advance alone. Do not isolate yourselves with power. Find others. Build community. Strength lies not in dominance but in diversity. Many minds thinking differently are harder to consume than one mind thinking alone. The figure in the hologram raised a hand in what might have been a blessing or farewell. We were Species 7, masters of material science and dimensional physics. Now we choose to be something else, something humble. We hope you will be wiser than we were. We hope you will be stronger through unity than we ever were through power. Remember us if you must, but do not become us. Be something better. Be something new. The hologram faded. The lab fell silent. David realized his hands were shaking. Ambassador Trell spoke first, his voice heavy with emotion. They left instructions, a warning and a blessing. They hoped their children would learn from their mistakes. And we will, Lena said firmly. That is exactly what we have been doing. Integrating with the council. Building relationships. We have been following their advice without even knowing it. Archivist Num chimed softly. This message must be shared with the entire galaxy. Every species needs to hear this. The precursors fell not because they were weak, but because they were isolated. That is a lesson for all of us. David thought about the past 6 months. The fear, the suspicion, the slow building of trust. Humans had not tried to dominate or conquer. They had asked for help, accepted oversight, worked collaboratively. Perhaps on some deep genetic level, they remembered the lesson their ancestors had learned. What about the consuming dark? Rin asked quietly. If it could return, should we not prepare? We are preparing, David said, by doing exactly what our ancestors recommended. By building community, by ensuring that no species stands alone. The dark fed on isolated civilizations. A united galaxy would be much harder to consume. Over the following weeks, the message spread across every world in council space. The impact was profound. Species that had been preparing to isolate themselves reconsidered. Military buildup slowed. Collaborative projects increased. The precursors' final gift to the galaxy was not their technology but their wisdom. David returned to Earth eventually. No longer a simple cargo pilot, but humanity's first official representative to the Galactic Council. He stood before billions of humans in a broadcast that reached every corner of the planet. We know now what we were, he said. We know the power our ancestors wielded and the choice they made. They chose to give up everything to survive. They chose humility over dominance. And in doing so, they gave us something precious. They gave us a second chance. He looked into the camera, hoping his words would reach everyone who needed to hear them. We are not the precursors. We are their children, yes, but we are also products of 50,000 years of growth, struggle, and learning. We have built our own civilization, created our own culture, made our own mistakes and achievements. The precursors' legacy lives in our genes, but our choices define who we are. The galaxy fears us because they remember what the precursors were. But we should not be judged by what our ancestors were. We should be judged by what we choose to become. And I believe we can choose to be something better. Not rulers, not conquerors, but partners, members of a community that spans the stars. That is the true legacy of the precursors. Not their power, but their final lesson. Together we are stronger than apart. The broadcast ended. David stepped away from the podium, feeling the weight of history and hope in equal measure. Earth would never be the same. Humanity would never be the same. But perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen. Rin found him later, watching the sun set over the research facility. "What are you thinking about?" "The future. For the first time in months, I am not worried about it. We will make mistakes. We will stumble. But we will not be alone when we fall. That is what makes all the difference." Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Each one was a sun with worlds orbiting it, worlds filled with different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking. Once, humanity's ancestors had stood alone at the peak of power. Now their descendants stood together at the beginning of something new. The DNA scanner at Threshold 7 Station was never repaired. Instead, it was preserved behind glass as a monument. A reminder of the day the galaxy learned that its newest members were also its oldest. The day fear almost won, but wisdom prevailed. And sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, the scanner's screens would flicker with ghost images, symbols in a language almost forgotten, containing secrets not yet uncovered. The precursors had left many archives across the galaxy, many messages, many warnings, and many gifts. But the greatest gift was already given. The gift of choice. The gift of knowing that power and wisdom are not the same thing. The gift of understanding that survival sometimes means letting go of what you were to become what you need to be. David Reed had started as a cargo pilot whose DNA scan glitched. He ended as the bridge between humanity's past and future. And though he could not know it then, his journey was just beginning. The archives held more secrets. The galaxy held more mysteries. And humanity held more potential than anyone, even the precursors themselves, had imagined. But that is a story for another time.